Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Monday's Wealth Creation Show. Now, let's dive right in, Jim, because we had a good rundown of what you had purchased up to about, I think, property 11 or 12, and we're going to run through the remainder of that today in addition to what you've already covered.
This series is probably going to go on for another couple of weeks, purely for the fact that I thought I would get through this all in one, 7 episodes, but it will go a lot longer. For everybody on there, what we're going to talk about today is we actually ended off, and it was like an EastEnders when we were talking about the fact that I actually lived in the street that I actually began to rent quite a lot of property. And then when I subsequently moved out of that street, after everybody knowing everybody in that street, all of a sudden everybody in that street actually turned on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what? Why would you turn on me? But it's the old. It's the old. People like to see you get ahead, but not ahead of them.
Yeah.
And it's a great analogy, but I always firmly believe in that, because if you look at every single circumstances of that in anybody's life, and you see that they don't want great, fantastic, but as soon as you get ahead of them, it's like, wait a minute, you're actually doing better than me now. So some people actually get extremely jealous.
Yeah.
And this is what happened in terms of where I was in my journey. Basically, what this, a couple of people in that street actually got together. They formed what they called a homeowners association. So it shows you how anti they were to tenants.
Yeah.
And these type of people still are quite anti to tenants. There's almost like for some people they've got to stigmatize a tenant as if there's something wrong with them, and it's like, well, all they're doing is choosing to rent their house actually than own their house. It's less stigma today, and a lot of people will listen to this or look at this and think, really? It's like, you're absolutely right. This is 20 years ago, remember?
It still happens today, though. I see it. I mean, it's not as common, and then people have a different perspective, but it still happens.
So what had happened was basically that, I had moved out the street and I had moved onto a house which was basically about 8 times the value of the house I was living in.
Mm-hmm.
And they just couldn't get it into their head how somebody like me could actually move from, where I was in a effectively a 2-bedroom flat, maisonette, into a 4-bedroom detached house in one of the most desirable areas in Leven. And that's what it came down to. So they formed an association just for homeowners. They started to target me in particular, and actually going about everything that was wrong with their street. And they used to actually say it was my fault. So much so that I used to get a counsellor who represented the area, who's no longer here, I don't think. She used to come to me every single time saying, this is wrong with that property and that's wrong with this property. And there's people doing this in the street and doing that in the street and dumping all their stuff. And it was because she was getting fed that information from them, from this homeowners association. And the difficulty was there is every time she came to me and I said, and I'm laughing about this because I think, wow, this is pretty unbelievable when you look back on it now. So she came to me with the concerns, and a classic example was the pend has actually been covered in paint. So a couple of children have actually taken the paint and they're throwing it all over the pend, going up between the houses.
Yeah.
And it's ruined all the pend, and it's all your fault because it's your tenants. Now, it's all your fault because it's your tenants. So the reality of that is, I then said, well, what house are you talking about? And she named the house and the address, and I subsequently went back there and went, well, it's no mine. And that happened a lot of times where she
just assumed that it was yours. Yeah.
Basically, what they were doing is they were loading the gun and letting her fire it, if you understand that metaphor. Yeah. And every single time she came to me with a concern about one of the properties in that street in particular that I'd actually bought quite a lot in, it was nothing to do with me at all. None of these properties were anything to do with me at all. Things like antisocial behaviour, people dumping their stuff in the street, and people actually, fighting with each other, and just being antisocial to their neighbours as well. And none of these properties, when she came to me, were anything to do with me at all. I had no ownership of them. I had no management of them at all. They were someone else completely. Either they were homeowners in their own right, or it was another landlord. So it was pretty embarrassing for this councillor at the time. And eventually she washed her hands of them and said, look, this is ridiculous. This is getting beyond a joke. And she realised it herself. The other one as well is one night they actually, two of the guys in that group, actually appeared at my door, probably about 8 o'clock at night, ready to fight me, saying it was something to do, with one of my tenants and one of my properties, which had nothing to do with me. Yeah. But they were literally, when I was trying to feed Tony, she was in the high chair and she must have been about, 6 months or something like that in the kitchen. I opened the door. Oh, how are you getting on? What seems to be the problem? The next minute, they're threatening me. They're doing everything possible and they're ready to fight me. And Tony's screaming in the high chair. And I'm saying, I can't believe this is happening. And I just closed the door. I had to call the police. Mm-hmm. For that reason. And it had nothing to do with me at all. It's just that they felt that I was the person. This is the whole thing about you stick your head above the parapet, you're going to get eggs thrown at you. You have to realise things like that will happen. And you do realise that right now, because what's happening right now is the Scottish government's vilifying landlords.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the housing crisis is all, according to the Scottish government, is all down to private landlords. It's all our fault for keeping all these properties. And then you get this statement going about the now is like, property isn't for profit. It's only for people living in. Yeah, and exactly, that's what the tenants do. They live in the property.
Yeah.
And
the profit is a byproduct to providing a home.
Yeah, exactly. So at what point do you think no tenant should have property then? Because somebody's going to have to rent them the property. And if the council don't have them, who's going to have them? Do you want a bank to have them? Do you want a corporate owner to have them? This is where we come back down to. And I can't see. I think people just use this as a conversation or in their head in order to justify the story they tell themselves. And it's like, woe is me, I've not had good luck. So I tell you what, I'm going to kick a landlord today. That's effectively what this is. And this is where this will come. So for anybody out there that's an investor or a landlord and they're going through hard times mentally, and I'll guarantee you mentally it will be, well, take stock in the fact that this has always happened. So don't worry about it. It has always happened. Private landlords have always been vilified. I actually used to turn up to some public speaking events on behalf of, I used to be invited because I was the chairman of the National Landlord Association in Scotland. I used to be invited by Shelter, by Crisis and stuff like that. And in order to break the silence in the room, I actually used to walk in and I say, I used to look at the window and I used to say, oh good, there's no trees. And I don't see any rope about, so I'm okay. And genuinely, and honestly, you wouldn't believe how many people in the room actually got that joke. But then it tells you how the way they think, and the fact that, and that was the only way you broke the silence in the room. And sometimes even as well in Shelter, I used to get up and I used to say to them, you're absolutely right. Bad housing does wreck lives. Mm-hmm. Eh? And like everybody in the room was like, what? We were ready for a fight. This guy's agreeing with us. see how that happens. People are, people like that are ready for a fight. And it's the old expression about, yourself. It's like never fight with a pig because you'll both get dirty, but the pig loves it. Mm-hmm. So that's where this all came from. And that's where it all kicked off. And it was the crabs, the proverbial, the analogy about the crabs in the bucket. It's like they wanted me to be just like them. They wanted to drag me back to where I was. They wanted to put me back in the 2-bedroom flat in the street that they lived in because they got really annoyed at the fact that I had built for the next 5 years. I had walked back and forward in front of them all the time, at the weekends and at nights and everything like that, while they were all sitting in their garden getting pissed and having barbecues. I was basically building my property empire, building my future, building my family's future.
You touched on that just before we finished last week, and obviously we're running out of time a wee bit more overrun, but they obviously are in that mindset of you've now moved out the street and didn't understand why, but at the time they were saying to you, well, you were running back and forward and doing this and working all the time that they were using as social time, then they couldn't understand how you had progressed out with that, and they like to say that, and then that's when we hit the crab in the bucket
Absolutely.
Obviously, like,
That's effectively what
primitive
happens.
dragging you back. Yeah,
Yep,
I've tried.
absolutely. That's effectively what happens. So anybody out there, you're going to go through this all the time, every time, not just in property investment, in anything you ever do in any business. We've got a nation that does not celebrate people that are successful.
Yeah.
See, in America, completely different, totally different mindset. Congratulations, you're successful. But we seem to have this stigmatized about profit, about the fact that it's not good to make profit. And you should be guilty. You should feel guilty at the fact that you make profit. But what you don't realize, anybody out there that thinks like that mentality, is you have to make a profit in order to reinvest. A housing association makes a profit. A council makes a profit. Because if they don't make a profit, they'll have to they've got nothing to reinvest in their stock. They've got nothing to improve the stock. They've got nothing to give anybody any leeway if they can't afford the rent. They need to make a return in order to do it. The profit is there to facilitate the growth of the business and keeping the business on track as well.
Yeah, and I think if you don't have that profit, to keep it compliant and keep it up to code and keep it obviously up to date with in terms of internal and things, then you're you're providing substandard property, which you're going to get then obviously castigated for as well.
Yeah. We're in a property investment industry where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Yeah. If you understand that and enjoy the journey, that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like winning, okay? This is quite an important phrase here. And I like winning. But I tell you what, I love losing just as much because I just want to play the game again. And effectively, this is what I'm doing. I love the process and I love the game. It's the journey. If you love the journey, it doesn't matter what you do. You'll still get up every single day and you'll enjoy the things that you do. So when you do get what I call the neg heads, in other words, the negative people that think in their mind negative all the time, if you do get these type of people, then just brush them off and move on. You're always going to get that. But for God's sake, don't do what I do. Do not stop to throw stones at every dog on the way. Because I do that every single time, Richard, and I can't help it for some reason. And I need to. There's my self-talk. See that? I can't help it. Guess what? You won't be able to help it then, because I'm telling myself that every single time. I can't help it. I can't stop it. And I will stop it. See how that I can stop it. I might stop it. And I will stop it. It's more authoritative.
Yeah.
So it's all these wee things that you learn in the way of other people that have gone before you are far more successful than you in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing things. Interestingly enough, right, okay, let's talk about the journey of some of the other properties and what I've learned, other ones. Okay, so this one was actually in July 2000 that I bought. It was a 2-bedroom lower flat. This is when actually, because I was buying so much property, I was actually now getting lead generation. People were actually coming to me because I was the person on the block. You know, I was the person that was buying property. I was the only private landlord really at that time with a huge growth strategy in terms of what I was doing. So I was buying property like it was going out of fashion. And this was in the early 2000s. Well, it was the year 2000 and 1999, 1998, and 97. So people actually started to see this meteoric rise and they were starting to go, what's he doing? And that's when you started to have other people round about me. Some of my friends actually started to mimic me and copying what I was doing. So they were also buying as well, but they didn't realize the strategy that I had. And it wasn't about take all the money out. It was keep all the money in and just keep reinvesting it and work on your day-to-day job. And that provides for your living. And the property empire will provide for your lifestyle later on. That's effectively what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm still doing that today. You know that yourself.
Yeah.
So 2-bedroom ground floor. This was actually, it was my sister-in-law's brother that actually gave me the referral from the landlord. She was looking to sell. And I just got in touch with her. I says, no bother, what are you thinking? And she says, well, you know, I'm thinking maybe about 13,500. I'm like, ooh, that sounds a bit lot. That sounds a lot. But you've got to remember, this is 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, so 20 years ago. But it's still the same today. Now, 20 years ago, I was getting interest rates at 7%. And it still made sense for me to buy.
Right, okay.
So bought this with legal fees, round about just under £14,000. Now I've had this for 22 years, coming on 23 years now. Think about
Only
that.
just become vacant again after a long time
I
recently.
had a long-term tenant in it. This was the story about the tenant that I actually used to prove. This is Arthur. Arthur was me for about 20 years. But Arthur got the bonus because I then worked at the... I had read a lot of legislation about Housing Benefit General Regulations Act in Scotland. And what it was I was trying to identify how you could have someone... I was trying to work out the system, how someone with a child could actually get a 2-bedroom and get a 2-bedroom allowance. Arthur had split from his partner, and I couldn't work out what it was that actually determined that. But then subsequently I found out it's actually whoever's got the child benefit, it follows them.
Yeah.
But when I put Arthur in there and I gave him the obviously he was getting his wee boy only from birth, to be honest. His wee boy grew up in that house at HUD. But Arthur didn't get that allowance. So I had said to Arthur at the time, look, I'm wanting to test this system to see if it works and to see if I get it right, or to see how it works and who gets the allocation here. And then eventually, I got nailed with the downfall because the child benefit was in his partner's name. Therefore, that doesn't follow. So he's only allowed a 1-bedroom allowance, even though he's got a young child he gets for access. So that's one of the downfalls about the system. If you're a single parent now and you don't have the child benefit in your name, you don't get any money towards having that 2nd bedroom for your child at the weekends.
You don't get that entitlement, yeah.
Yeah, which is to a degree not right. But I don't see the Greens championing this. I don't see the Greens going on about this, saying this isn't fair for people that are single parents. And they're not getting their allowance correctly. I don't see the Greens standing up for the Minister for Tenants too, who is Patrick Harvey.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's not even saying anything about that at all. He's never said anything about that. He's always about, castigating private landlords, but he doesn't want to say anything for tenants, and yet he's the Minister for Tenants. He's not the Minister for Private Landlords. So what does that say about that type of person? So subsequently, he lived with me for all these years, and I just charged him $350 instead of $450 every month. So essentially, over 20 years,
is the 1-bedroom allowance for a single person over 35.
Essentially, over 20 years. Well, it was 25 at that time.
Well,
essentially, over these years, he's had a 1,200 reduction in his rent for 20 years. That is £25,000 of a discount because he lived with me for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't really bothered about that. It's like, wait a minute, what, a private landlord, no maximising profits? Why would you not evict him and put another person in? Well, why would I want to do that? Is that the right thing to do? Just because you can't, you're falling on hard times, I can afford to do it. And then I turn around to him and go, by the way, I need another tenant in there because I want to maximise the rent because I'm a greedy landlord. Because that's what people think, don't they? So yeah. I kept him there for 20 years and I looked after him. And there was sometimes he actually got a job and he was on benefits and he got a job and he was back and forward. And I lost quite a lot in between. You know yourself, I did. Arthur didn't seem to keep track of that, but then that's Arthur. That's the way he was. And that's fine with me because it was fine. It was tolerable for me. It was $350 I was getting. The mortgage itself was probably around about 150 quid. It wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah,
and
I think
I felt it was important to look after him and his wee boy rather than actually say and be that type of person who I never want to be, as that person that says, oh, I'm needing to get more rent, so I'm going to put you out.
Yeah, and Arthur there was always money coming through. He looked after the place, left the place really nice. So it worked both ways.
And it wasn't antisocial, so I'm fine with that. But remember, I gave $25,000 off. But it was easy when he came to me and says, I'm wanting the windows changed, I'm wanting a new kitchen, I'm wanting a new heating system. And I'm like, Arthur, all that money I've just given you in a discount of $25,000 for the last 20 years is your heating system, your kitchen, your windows and all the rest of it. But I still had to do that.
You still put the you put the new
regardless
heating system in, yeah.
So I took the hit for that, and I had to take the hit for all the upgrades as well, which wasn't really built into the increase. So, it was just one of these things that I did. So that's one of the lessons I learned off of that. There's sometimes you've got to be, most of the time I would say you've got to be a social landlord. And I mean social as in morality more than anything. Nothing to do with housing association and council, because I think they have a different morality completely. They just throw money away left, right, and centre, and actually don't invest in the right thing. And they're more draconian than us when it comes to eviction.
Oh yeah.
Next one. So that's the first one I learned a lesson from.
So that was a 2-bed flat.
Yeah, next one is a 1-bed lower. How did that come about? Again, that was a repossession. I picked it up for just under 12,000, 1 bedroom. Needed a lot of work done to it, but it was easy just to tart it up, decorate, carpet. I did all this myself, remember, and just get it ready for somebody else moving in. So again, that was a pretty straightforward one to do, and just turn around. That was almost the next month. And then and probably the one at 2, that one I learned off of. What did I learn off of that one? Upstairs was quite challenging. Wouldn't put their hand in their pocket for anything.
Yeah, because it's an owner-occupier upstairs.
Owner-occupier. See, a private landlord. If you're a private landlord, you've got to put your hand in your pocket for everything. That's what's expected of you from the owner-occupiers.
Yeah.
But as soon as the owner-occupiers and you need to do something, the owner-occupiers are like, oh, I've got no money. All of a sudden, they've no money, and you've got to pay for it again.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the lesson I learned out of that one, because the upstairs didn't want to spend money on anything. Anything that affected them, they wanted me to contribute to. Anything that affected me and not them, they didn't want to pay a penny to. That's a familiar story, by the way.
I've just had the gutter fixed on the roof at that one, and I've never had anything for upstairs. No response, nothing.
No. And that'll go on forever and ever. And you can't let things like that hold you back, because remember, this is all about the tenant's welfare. Yeah. This is all about looking after a tenant. You can't then turn around and say, oh, well, they're not going to contribute to it. It's like, well, it's not the tenant's fault.
I'll just leave it then.
Yeah, and if it is a standard repairing act issue, then you've got to do it. So this is why you have to have profit.
Yeah.
Because you need the money to do that and reinvest in all these repairs and improvements over the years. So that's probably the lesson I learned out of that. Next one, 3-bedroom upper. We're actually just refurbing that one right now, aren't we?
We're just in the early stages.
So I've just got the quote for the windows. Now, I bought this in August 2000. I've just got the quote for the window. Now, I bought this one for 20,000.
This is a decent sized one as well. The 3 bedrooms in the street are good size.
3 bedroom. So it was a great one, a good earner, remember. The numbers made sense for me. I was able to remortgage it because I got a remortgage at a higher price. All the other ones, by the way, I was able to remortgage, get money out and put it back in. Yeah. The remortgage was never about taking money out to spend or get new cars or houses or anything like that for anything me. It was always to reinvest back in the business and actually reinvest in more stock and actually more deposits for houses. So all I was doing is I was taking the money from that house and then actually reinvesting to make more money over and above. So it's making money on the money, on the money, on the money, on the money. And this could go on forever for a lot of private landlords and how they do it and how investors do it. This is how investors do it anyway as well. This is how stock market investors do it. They take their funds and they borrow against their funds as well, and then they reinvest and get more funds and make higher return. This is normal practice for day-to-day business, by the way. This is what businesses do as well. It's return on capital employed. That's what the KPI is. Look up return on capital employed. That's the most important thing. So it's the capital you've got in the business and what return you're getting in terms of profit for that capital you've got invested. Yeah. And there comes and it's measured. That return on capital employed is measured against a bank rate. Okay. So new kitchen. We're going to be putting in. We're going to be putting in new heating. We're going to put in new double glazing. I've just got a quote for that, about £5,000. So that's getting done as well. See where all this money starts to add up. 5,000, new kitchen, new bathroom, new bathroom as well. So this is all getting upgraded completely. So someone's going to get a brand new property. 3-bedroom, beautiful, decorated carpet as well. I feel like moving back there myself. Save myself a fortune.
Yeah, it'll be nice when it's done.
And that'll rent for, what will that rent for?
The 3-bed we'll get probably about £550.
Yeah. So I'm paying currently £139 on that interest-only mortgage, and it's a variable rate. But I'll keep it like that all the time.
Yeah.
And people are going, oh my God, you're going to get 500 and you're going to get, that's obscene, you making that amount of money. Hold it though. I've just told you, I'm putting in about 20,000 for the actual reinvestment or the refurbishment of the whole property. That's where the return on capital is, because you're reinvesting that in the business and reinvesting it in the repairs and improvements to the stock itself. So the base price won't actually increase, because it won't be capitalized. You're able to write it off because you're replacing like for like, and the tenant's been in it before, you've had it rented before, so therefore it's classified as a revenue expenditure. It's not a capital expenditure, so you can deduct it against your rent straight away.
Yeah. Also to note that the local housing allowance now for a 3-bedroom is 573.
Yeah.
Which is slightly more than the 550 we would probably charge for it. So yeah, the council's set that 573 as their local housing allowance.
Yeah. And that's key as well. So knowing your numbers and understanding you've got a huge tolerance limit there.
Yeah.
But incidentally, we did have this property rented for 360 as well.
Yeah, we had a guy in there. It's just a single guy.
A single guy. And that's what I love about getting the properties at the right price, because then you've got the options to rent to a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom person. So you can have different tiered rent levels, and it can still be tolerable in terms of where you are, because the occupancy is the more important one, because every single week you've not got a property occupied, you lose the capacity of getting that extra rent. So that's the opportunity cost. Plus the fact that you're obviously having it empty, you're obviously still paying for utilities and standing charges, and then potentially you're getting into council tax territory after a period of time where you start paying that. So you're better to have somebody rather than nobody in there if the numbers work. This is why, again, you get the numbers right in the first place.
Yeah, and that's a valuable lesson to learn with that one. Like you say, getting the numbers right and thinking about your occupancy over and above. And we were in that situation where it was empty, and putting the guy in at the single room rate made sense. So that's what we done. And he was in there for about 3 years.
And again, this is all about, what we've done over the years is I've not massively put a huge amount of money into actually refurbish this property. It's been nice and laid out, nicely laid out, and it's been clean and tidy for somebody to move in. So decoration and carpets was all it was needed all these years.
Yeah.
I'm only replacing the double glazing because there is double glazing in there now, because it is the old aluminium double glazing. Now it's not the old Alue glaze or Everest aluminium where it's tiny
like the window ones. No.
Yeah, they're a wee bit offline now, and they're not able to shut and open properly and all the rest of it. And I thought
it's the right time to do the work.
This needs to be done. Yeah, this needs to be done definitely. So while that's empty, we're getting it refurbed, and we'll advertise it. That's another key one as well. Advertise at the same time as you're refurbing. So when you're refurbing a property, go around and advertise it. Put a video up or something like that. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. If anybody's interested in this property, it's going to go for this sort of price. That's another key thing that you can do. Advertise your property now for rent. That's another lesson I've learned from this over the years. The next one's quite an interesting one. It's a lower 2-bedroom flat. Now, these were originally 1-bedroom flats, but what they did was they got planning permission to take away the front door and actually make a single bedroom by taking a bit off the double bedroom at the front.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these were. So they were adapted from a 1-bedroom to a 2-bedroom at minimal cost. It was just putting an RSJ up.
Mm-hmm.
And then just taking away the front door and putting a window in there with a top hopper on it, and then just actually, put a radiator in the room with a stud round it. It was as simple as that. That they were good. These houses are very well laid out for that reason, and that upgraded it straight away. But I actually picked it up for, must have been a repossession. This one I picked up for 10,000. So I picked this one up for £10,000, and that was in the year 2000. And again, that was a variable rate. This is the Clydesdale period, when I started to remortgage. So I was picking them up for that price on the Bank of Scotland when I had the commercial term loans with them, paying down the loan. And then along came the investment housing loans, interest-only mortgages, and then I started to move them all. So I started to get mortgages at 32,000, for this £10,000 property. So that released 20,000, and that's not taxable if you remortgage. So that's 20,000, and I could take 20,000 and get more houses with that, get more property, and then reinvest it every single time. Or I could do some minor upgrades and reinvest as well. So that was quite an interesting one. What did that tell me? What did that teach me? How to lay out the property properly, possibly to get the maximum amount of return. Upstairs neighbour was another landlord who was terrible. And incidentally, I've bought one of their properties, and they're selling everything off right now. And I'm not surprised, because they've not actually geared themselves properly, and they've not actually reinvested in their stock over the years. They've just actually, they've obviously done it all wrong. I remember this guy's meant to be a roofer, and yet he botched everything.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but he was rubbish at what he did. And every single problem, every time there was something wrong, I had to go up and fix it with the tenant upstairs, because this guy was just so lazy as a landlord that he wouldn't do anything. That's the type of people you don't want to be private landlords. Now, they are few and far between, but you really want private landlords that are actually, they're driven and they want to reinvest, and they realise that, having a tenant in a property is an investment in the tenant's future as well as your future as well. So that's probably one of the lessons I've learned from that one. The next one, a 3-bedroom. This was an upper.
Yeah.
And again, it's difficult to remember, because you're talking about 20 years ago, how I managed to get these properties at these prices. But again, I think that's a repossession.
I was just going to say, was that a repossession? I think a few of them were. So.
£16,000, or it was probably 15.5. I was quibbling over a couple of £100 here and there when I was making offers. I would have had, I would have probably had another 300 properties if I hadn't quibbled over a couple of £100, literally. But the problem was here, I would have overpaid for everything. I think I was sticking to my guns. Here's the lesson I learned.
You're sticking to your numbers, and that's why.
If you stick to your guns over the years and you walk away from certain deals with estate agents after trying to get a deal with them, and them saying, "Oh, we want another £500 out of you," and you're like, "No, I'm not prepared to pay that." It sets a precedent with the estate agents that what you say is your final word. If you just give way every single time with every single offer, then the estate agents know they'll get more money out of you every single time. Therefore, it's going to eat into your capital. There's an abundance of property out there. You just have to wait for it over a period of time, and it will become available to you. It's just the preparation and opportunity meets the point of readiness.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that's taught me, and the fact that it's a waiting game. This is incidentally one of the ones that watch the old horsehair ceilings. My father-in-law was painting the ceiling one time, and it was a horsehair ceiling, and you know how you push it with a roller because you're got it on a pole.
Yeah.
But the whole ceiling came down on him, and you're talking about that thick. You're not talking about a wee piddly thing, like normal plasterboard. You're talking about a big, huge, heavy thing. And I tell you what, it just missed his head and hit his shoulder, and it was a sigh of relief, because he probably would have been hospitalised with that, and because they're very, very dangerous if they're not done right. So what happens is, if you have to put a false ceiling in, you then have to what they'd call poke that ceiling in order to get all the old horsehair lath and plaster off. Because that's what they used to do. You used to take horsehair and mix it in with the plaster in order for it to bond with each other. So when you take down old plaster from the ceilings, you'll see hairs in between, and that's horsehair. But if you're going to replace that ceiling, take that down first, not the strap and boarding. You leave that, and then you put the false ceiling on that once all that plaster's down. Because what will happen as well is, if you leave that up, then the plaster will start falling onto the plasterboard, and therefore the plasterboard will start getting a bevel in it. Yeah, and that's probably what I've learned for that one as well. That's one of the ones on a fixed rate deal. This is one of the ones that to me is actually almost touching negative equity. There's no way I'm going to be able to refinance this. At the time, they were offered 90% loan to values in the year 2000. Bank of Scotland came along and said to me, "We'll give you 90% loan to value." The valuation was around about 60,000. I got a 53,000 mortgage on it, and lo and behold, you know yourself that wasn't even that value until the last year. recovering. Now, at that time in 2006, when I got the deal, the new deal, the price of the properties were up at 60 and 65, but they've only just recovered to that again. Now, notice how that happens. This is one of the ones I talk about, and this is the lesson I learned for this one, is you can have a deferred capital gain if you're intending on selling this. So what do I mean by a deferred capital gain? Well, it's the fact that you've got a mortgage at 53,000 and you've got a property that's worth 60,000, but you actually bought it for 16,000. So essentially, in the real world, if you sold it for 60 again, okay, you would have a capital gain of 16. You'd have a capital gain of 44,000.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have a capital gain of 44,000. You'd have to pay about a third of that because you're a higher rate taxpayer now. So you're paying a third of that, which is 15,000. You've sold it for 60,000, right? Now you've got incidentals, which is maybe a couple of thousand for your lawyer and your estate agent. So you're down to 58,000. You've got another 15,000 capital gains to whack off. So you're down to 48, you're down to 43,000, but you've got a 53,000 mortgage to pay off. Who dear? You've got to spend £10,000.
That's where it leaves you negative, yeah.
Yeah, that's why what I talk about a lot of times called deferred capital gains. This is what a lot of property investors that go on TikTok and go, if you sell that one for this price, and they do hypothetical things, and they do, if I sold this one for that, and I did this, and I did that, and I did this, and I did that, this is what I would make. And it's like, that's bullshit. That's like, you're instantly right there. Yeah, and I'll remortgage it, and I'll get all the money back out. And my first question to that is when they say they remortgage it after they've got a huge valuation on it, and all they bought it for peanuts, is, what about your deferred capital gain? What are you going to do about that? And they're going, what? What do you mean deferred capital gain? Well, if you intend to sell it, and then the usual response comes back is, I'll never sell it. I tell you what, you'll never sell it because you'll not be able to, because you'll not have the money to sell it. You'll be tied into it. So this is why. But this is also the other lesson I learned from this one is, even though I was sitting with deferred capital gain, even though I was in negative equity, because I was in negative equity over the years after that, after the credit crunch crashed, it didn't matter really, because I had never any intention of selling it. So if I've got no intention on selling it, whether it's 50 pence to buy it again, that's the value, then it makes no difference to me. Luckily enough, as I said, I went on, and this is another lesson. Luckily enough, I went on the Bank of Scotland's website and they went, well, we don't need you to do a valuation and somebody go round anymore. So we can fix rate, we could do a new deal with you, a 5-year fixed rate deal at 4.91%. Happy days. Because it was approaching 7 and 7.5%, and I was like, oh my god, happy days.
Yeah.
I'll take that deal right now. So
what did you say, 4.9?
4.91 for 5 years at interest only. And I've no intention of selling ever. I've got a whole lot of other properties I can sell if I really want to release money and all the rest of it. So I don't really want to do anything with this, but actually just keep it and rent it at that level. So it's a 218 mortgage, interest only, for the next 5 years, and we're renting at 475 now.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, you're clearing what, 250, and 250 is all right. 250 is a good, a good clearance in order to cover overheads and cover any management fees that you're having to do as well. So now we know at 475 that's a lot lower than what the actual rent should be.
Yeah.
This again coming back to saying, who's the social landlord here? Because what does a 3-bedroom get on low allowance?
573.
Yeah, and I'm getting 475.
So you're £100 less.
£100 less a month for the tenant that lives in that property. They're saving £1,200 a year on the rent. Again, Patrick Harvey, who's the social landlord here? Certainly no you. He doesn't have a clue, does he? He has no idea what's going on and how we operate as investment advisors and business owners, and how social we are to what we do in terms of our tenants and how we look after them. Next one for me, 2-bedroom upper flat. Now, I actually bought this in 2001. See how that July, August, September, October, I'd bought the last 5 within July, August, September, October, 4 months.
4 months.
I was on a run. I was on a roll. I was just,
Yeah.
I was releasing money and reinvesting in the early 2000s all the time. So the next one,
You can see how your story's how it's picked up momentum as you go through your.
I see how the momentum's starting to pick up. I mean, in 2000 and in 1997, I owned one for the whole year. In 1998, I bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So one became 6 because I proved the model and I went, oh, you're beauty. Let's go for it. And I got a facility from the bank. And then the next year, 1999, I bought 3. And then in the year 2000, I bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So see how that's starting to build?
Yeah.
Starting to reinvest, release money because the rates are now. When I was doing this and I was releasing money, I was getting great deals. There's probably the lesson here as well. There was a great deal out there, and it was base plus 1.15% trackers for life.
Yeah.
This was in Northern Rock. They were given for life trackers. So I've still got all these. There's no way I'm going to release them. I'm going to take these away. I'm just going to keep them. And I'm not bothered about the equity alone. If I want a further advance, I can get a further advance at a different rate. But I don't want to do that because I'm comfortable with the tolerance that we've got and the level of loan to value we've got, because it gives us a lot of degree of certainty and less risk attached to the portfolio we've got and we're operating. It also gives the tenants security of tenure. There's no way I'm ever going to leave a tenant in the lurch because I've got security of tenure, because my loan to value is so low, and I can afford to run at a really low level of rent in order to make sure the business is sustained and looked after, because I don't really take any money from this. I'll say that again. I don't really take any money from this. This just keeps reinvesting and building.
Yeah.
My living and my lifestyles is an estate agent. That's who I operate. That's where my income is from day to day. I don't take any money really out of the buy-to-let business. It all reinvests and goes back in. And it's for things like one-offs, as I'd said before, and it's to help the children later on. My kids, the grandkids and the great-grandkids and all the rest of it. It's to build something for them, because they'll have nothing. They'll have nothing when they retire. They will have to work till they die. That's effectively it. And the way the government's going, and they're taking everything for everybody, they'll need to have something, because they're just getting screwed to the wall. One day you'll just work for nothing. I think that's going to come eventually, not in our lifetime, but later on. I think people will just work for nothing. That's what they'll do, just to have some sort of normality society. Almost like, and Roddenberry probably did it, and it was very utopian at the time, Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek, and the fact that people just worked and then they enjoyed, leisure and all the rest of it. But they really didn't turn around one day and say, I've got nothing, I've got no money.
Yeah.
Always had food, they always had a roof over their head. They were always due luxury and leisure and all the rest of it, and what they called leave from their ship. And that's effectively probably how society will end up in 100, 150 years' time. I think, anyway, that's more or less where we're going. Elon Musk touched on it the other day, how people will always have to be given a salary as a minimum, even though they're unemployed. Not benefits, but just a salary.
In order to live.
Yeah, in order to live comfortably like everybody else, because they'll be deliberately unemployed because of automation. I don't believe that, though. I actually believe that there'll be more jobs because of automation, because you'll have to have somebody to look after these things and actually repair them all the time, and actually make sure they run properly. You'll always have to have human intervention somewhere.
Yeah, I believe that as well.
So actually, this upper flat, this is the one which I taught my daughter a very valuable lesson, and this is the most memorable one out of a lot of them I've had. Young girl actually moved into it. I mean, she was really nice. She, at the time, she referenced up fine. Our landlord check from a previous landlord was fine. You notice how I'm starting to do this now?
Yeah.
I'm just starting to check. I'm starting to make sure she's not got any. Now, there was no credit reference agencies at that time. You really didn't have access to that, still in the early 2000s. So when I moved her in, I think it was Fiona, I moved her in. She was fine. She looked after the property. She had a young child, and that was it. But her brother, I never knew anything about. It's the entourage that comes with them sometimes that you've got to watch out for. So you have to watch out who they associate with, because these are the people that will end up in their house, and they'll probably be antisocial. So our brother had a drugs problem, and he had a bad drugs problem. And I didn't know about this, but one day I went round the house, and all of a sudden, for an inspection, because I didn't know what was going on, and then lo and behold, the door was open, and I opened the door, and it was like the place is like a bomb site. And I was like, "What's going on here?" Now I was trying to contact Fiona, so I eventually got a hold of her on the phone. Says, "Look, I've had to move out. I had to go. My brother basically kept the door in, and he's now living in the property, and without any, just himself. There's no lock on the door or anything. This guy's just got, some stuff up against the door to keep it closed because he'd kicked the door in." So I walked in and basically said, "Shift yourself. You're not meant to be here at all. This is your sister's tenancy." He went, but I tell you what, there was 300 needles, discarded needles. Yeah, I'm talking about. You could imagine a coffee table. These long coffee tables you've got.
Yeah.
Literally every part of that coffee table was a disused needle. All over the place, all over the whole property. Now, I think I remember at that time, Tony was 9 years old. And I thought, here we go. This is a point. Because I used to try and teach Tony some lessons. So I just got Tony around straight away about drugs. And I took her around the house, and I told her beforehand, and I spoke to her about it. And I says to her, "Look, there's people in life that fall in hard times, not because they want to, because the path that they take is not the path that they should be on." Now, this is people that takes drugs. This was rife at the time, and they were learning about it at school. And I says, "This is what happens." Now, she knew what the property was like in the beginning, because she was helping me do them up, and coming round now and again as a young girl. Only once in a blue moon, though. So she knew the standard that we're actually doing them up to. So I thought this is a golden opportunity to take her around and show her how this is what happens when you fall in, you start using drugs. And literally, I took her around that property, and I think that's put her off for life. I think that's kept her on the track. Tony does not drink at all, really.
No.
And I think that's stuck in her mind all that time. I've never ever asked her about it, but I felt it was important to actually show her that this is what happens when you take drugs. This is what happens to your life. This is how it falls apart. It sounds great at the time, but this is and for me, doing this whole thing just for that one event to happen has been worth it.
Yeah, I think it's a good lesson visually for her to learn from, to go in and see how going down a path like that that's where you would end up. And I think that would have quite an impact on somebody, especially at that age. But it's a lesson well learned.
Yeah, it was horrific, Richard. Absolutely horrific to see all that. Before I was a landlord, I had no idea there was a drugs problem. And lo and behold, when I became a landlord, it was like, oh my God, drugs is rife all over the place. It doesn't discriminate between anybody. Just because you've got a lot of money, it doesn't mean to say it's you're not going to be addicted. It doesn't discriminate at all. It can get anybody at any point in time. Just stay away from it. That's probably my advice. Yeah. And I've always stayed away from it for that very reason. But I probably knew from a very young age anyway, before that I didn't, I was into all the bad stuff, and in the beginning, and I saw my pals drop like flies in terms of the way they were going, how they were really no bad and good, and going on a good track to a good education at school and everything like that. And then they got involved in addictions and all the rest of it, and then they were falling by the wayside, and that's what really put me off anything like that when I started to see the people around about me when I was younger. So it was never something I did. I subsequently actually bought that property for 16,000. I sold it for 47.
That's good.
I made a tidy 30 grand, which was another 200% on the original purchase price in terms of the return. And again, I come back to saying, what did I do with all this money when I was selling all these properties for the astronomical amounts? I just invested it back in property. That's all I did. I invested it in my house. That's what paid for all my improvements in my house, my new house, when I moved next door later on in 2006. I moved right next door to the house I was at now, which I'd moved into. It was a bigger house, and I was lucky enough, because I'd done all this, to actually wait 6 months and get it completely renovated before we moved in the door.
Yeah.
I even got a removal firm to move move all the furniture next door. Elaine was affronted. It was like, what? It's just next door. I'm not doing my back in. God, I've been lugging furniture up and downstairs and sweets up and downstairs on my back for God knows the past 6 years. It's like, as a landlord, that's the thing as well. I used to have a trolley, and I used to take fridges and freezers up the steps myself. And never mind all this, like, oh, I can't do it without a brace on my back. It's like, I just used to get on with it and do it. It's like, and do it myself. So that's the lesson I've learned for that one. Next one, actually, 1 bedroom lower flat. Now I think have you just sold it for a landlord of ours?
We're just about to. We're refurbing it. Yeah,
because I sold it to him in 2006 for £52,000, and he's had it all that time. But we got it back to rent, so we've actually made money out of that and the fees that we've done to rent it.
Yeah, and he actually made an all right profit out of it. To be fair, he's had good return and things, but it come the time for him, so we're doing it up and selling it on.
Yeah, when I bought it for 16. The probably one of the lessons I've learned out of that is, again, this is all down to vetting. This is all down to making sure you've got the right person. I think this again was another lead source. This was somebody looking to sell. They approached me direct and says, "I notice you're buying. Do you want to buy this one?" And lo and behold, I sold them it, or I bought it for them. I bought it from them, but I managed to pick it up for about 16,000, and then sell it, and 6 years later for 52. I hadn't really done anything to it, to be honest, Richard. I've managed to capitalise on the rise in the market. It was a phenomenal rise up to 2006 from the year 2000. So I managed to capitalise on that, and then again reinvest it back in the business. September 2006 as well was when I had retired. I was running my own estate agency with a business partner, and therefore it was like, opportunity to sell. At this point in time, I started to see numbers because I was an estate agent now. I started to see what you were getting. I didn't actually. I just buried my head so much in the sand and got so entrenched into doing this all the time that I didn't look at the bigger picture. And this is a key one. This is actually quite an important one. Then out of these two I've just sold, and the other ones I sold previously in 2006. I buried my head in the sand so much that I didn't realise the true value of what was there, because I just kept investing. And I didn't look at the bigger picture, the add-on about the fact that this is why it's important to speak to an estate agent about the current value of your portfolio. Yeah. Even if you think you know the value, speak to an estate agent about it, because then they'll give you a good idea. Then it'll give you more choices possibly for what you want to do in terms of refinancing or reinvesting or releasing more money to reinvest again. Or maybe just to say, look, now's the time to sell, because I could maybe sell one or two and it could pay down on the other ones. Therefore, I won't have a mortgage on that. Therefore, I won't have an issue about the Section 24 of the Income Tax Act, which is the relief at lower rate for mortgage interest payments. Yeah. So that's the sort of big picture it let me see. So I think that's the lessons I've learned out of these ones over the years, is to look at the bigger picture and look at the portfolio value. And again, it was only recently when we sold one in that street, and I went, "What? You're getting that for it again?" It's like, wow. And I'd just forgotten about it for all these years. It's like they've recovered. But I did say, I did say it, and it will be in the next couple of years that flats will be the biggest increases, or the least to decrease, I would say. In terms of price point, because they're very cost effective and they're easier and less to run in terms of costs. Yeah. So that's that one.
Your next one's a 1 bed as well.
Next one, 1 bedroom upper. 1 bedroom upper, £12,000. I bet you're quite surprised about that. Eh?
Yeah.
It's like had it since 2001, so £12,000, £350 a month. So do the math on that. 350 times 12 times 20 equals 84,000 in rent. Now, I'm not saying it's a full 84,000, but it's round about between 70 to about 80. So 70, about 80,000 in rent, and I bought it for £12,000. So it just shows you. And I've had good long-term tenants in these all the time.
We've got a long-term tenant in there just now. There's a couple of maintenance issues recently, but apart from that, it's been fine.
Again, a lifetime tracker, base plus 1.15.
Mm-hmm.
Interest on the mortgage is 95 quid a month. And the mortgage was, again, I managed to remortgage at 27,000. So remortgage at 27,000, I could sell that easily, probably at 50 now. So double what the mortgage is. So I'd be able to pay that back now, but there was a time that you couldn't do that. But again, I'm coming back to saying, it's like, why would you chop down the tree that bears the fruit? There's the lesson you learn out of that. Why would you chop down the tree that bears the fruit? I talk to a lot of landlords out there, investors who go, oh, I'm just looking to sell. And I'm like, right, tell me the numbers at what you've got. Well, this is the numbers. This is this. This is how much I bought it for. This is how much I'm earning from it. This is how much I pay out on it. This is how much my mortgage is. And what's your occupancy rate? Oh, well, my occupancy rate, it's always occupied. I've got a long-term tenant. Holy shit. Why are you selling this then? Yeah. Why would you want to do that? Because you're literally just going to chop down the tree that bears the fruit. Oh, I never thought of it like that. I tell you what, though, if you want to sell it, I'll buy
it. Yeah.
Because the numbers still make sense for me at the value you're talking about now that you're wanting for it. So I'll buy it if you want. So that's when people, I do talk to a lot of landlords like that and try to put them off selling purposely, because remember, there's 1,200 properties less, there's 1,200 less rental properties in Fife in the last 5 years than there is now in the private market. Yeah. 1,200 properties less. That means there's 1,200 families effectively out there. If you call a family maybe two people together, one person on their own, or 1,200 units, no longer available to rent for the private sector for people to actually live in. So there's no surprise you've got a problem with the shortage of housing stock for private renting sector now. And again, I come back to saying the powers that be want to make it worse.
Yeah.
They want to put people off buying rented property for investment. That's a crazy idea, especially if you've not got anything to replace it. This is what gives me confidence, though, in terms of where we are right now, and the fact that even though all these draconian measures are put in place, and you've mitigated for that, in other words, you've actually de-risked it for these occasions happening. Let me be clear about this: the rental freeze will continue after March.
Yeah.
It's been announced 2 days ago that the council housing and our South Housing Associations after March will be allowed to increase their rents, but private landlords won't. A two-tier system, eh?
Yeah.
And they think that's fair. Oh, but they charge a lot less rent. But they don't actually finance their properties because it's the public purse that financed it for them. Mm-hmm. So the public purse is actually subsidising that low rent. That's what's causing there. That's why they've got a low rent. Yeah. You finance my properties, and I'll charge the low rent as well that the councils are charging, because that's where the cost is. You can see that there: 124, 108, 139, 124, 100, 218, 95, 212. That's the rent. If you took that off the rents, we'd be back at council housing and housing association rents.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me what's taught me all these different lessons. I mean, we're going to stop there. We're going to talk next week about, wow, see the one next week that we're going to talk about. This is a classic. A tenant actually moved. Well, I'm going to talk about a tenant.
Yeah, I was going to say, leave it for.
Like, what? Are you having a laugh? So yeah. I'm going to do my EastEnders end and say that's it for this week. Listen, guys, if you've enjoyed what you've listened to, and you want more of this, please feel free to comment. Please feel free to share it and tag other people, and share it on all your property investors pages and stuff like that. Because genuinely, these are stories that everybody could learn from, and I still learn from today for that very reason.
Yeah, it's good to hear the journey and the lessons learned, and I think everybody could learn something from that if they're in the business of doing a portfolio, and or even if they're just starting out, not even halfway through their journey. So definitely lessons to be learned, and that'll be a good point to leave and pick up next week, and that'll be an interesting one to start with next week, Jim. So
absolutely,
thanks for that.
Okay, so that's this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye for now.
See you next week.